Hey guys, and welcome to chapter 11 of AP Euro for Dummies. We're on our last reading today, thank God. And honestly, you might want to grab a snack, grab a drink, and your notebook, of course. And also your review packet if you really want. If you haven't filled it out yet, because we are going into full detail about chapter 11, especially because we have a test on it. So I'm not going to waste any time about this because this video is going to be pretty long, I'm assuming. So let's go ahead and get started. As per usual, as I always tell you, when I scream at you highlight, you better highlight that. And honestly, this one's pretty important. But of course, you don't have to highlight everything if you think you got it down. But the main things I will tell you to highlight. Okay, so everyone in the 1300s in Europe thought everything was going to be chill after the High Middle Ages. But no. Highlight High Middle Ages. But by the 14th century, Europe hit a crisis and decline. And this was because of the Little Ice Age. Highlight Little Ice Age. And for the love of God, no, I am not talking about that stupid movie where the squirrel never gets the acorn and the freaking Sid the Sloth thing. If you correlate those two during this test and you put that Lizzie Carpenter taught you that in your DBQ the Ice Age was Sid the Sloth, no. So this Ice Age led to cooler weather. And when cooler weather, your crops don't grow, right? So this led to poor harvest. Highlight poor harvest. So this caused famine, which you could probably highlight famine if you want. And this caused famine and everybody to have a weak immune system. If the trash people do not get off my street right now, I swear. So while famine was killing everybody with the weak immune systems, the Black Death was like, oh, it is absolutely my time to shine and finish them. And the Black Death actually started in 1347 and it went until 1351. And if you think that this whole video is basically a recap of chapter 10, you're absolutely right. Because chapter 10 was more, think of it as when you go to see a movie, you see the movie trailer. Think of chapter 10 as the movie trailer and it gives you like little clips of the movie. But chapter 11 is like the full movie. So we're going absolutely in depth of all of this. So let's talk about the Black Death and how it started. So the Black Death was considered a bubonic plague. So what is a bubonic plague? A bubonic plague is a severe bacterial infection, and it is caused by a certain type of bacteria, which it's a difficult name that's not important that we don't need to know, but it is transmitted through the bites of little insects. So this disease was created from fleas, and they liked to transmit onto rats and little rodents, so they bit little rats and then the rats got the disease. So the only difference about this and what we have in our normal day life is this plague was we had fleas biting on rats, they got a disease. Basically how COVID started, if I'm honest. Okay? But the only difference in our day is when we get a mosquito bite, we don't get the plague, do we now? So because the fleas spread to the rats and then the rats were kind of all running around the cities of where you lived and stuff, these rats actually transmitted the disease along trade routes. So highlight trade routes. And this plague killed about 1/3 to 1/2 of the population in Europe. So a lot of Christians joined the flagellant movement. Highlight flagellant movement. So these members of the flagellant group, they actually believed that putting themselves through the physical pain and suffering that Christ went through would purify their souls and God would like forgive them, or because they believe that, I don't know, they don't know how, they believe that God started the plague and they were like, God's punishing us, so maybe if we give ourselves the same pain that Christ experienced, like dying on the cross, that means that he will stop the plague. But this group is kind of equivalent to your dad spanking you with a belt in front of people in public because they did all these pain things in public. So other Christians, of course, believe that the Jews were poisoning the wells. So you can go ahead and highlight Jews and poisoning wells, and they believe because they got their water from wells like Jack and Jill did, and they believe that the Jews went up to the little hill and they poisoned their drinking water, which obviously was not true. So with so many people dead, peasants, highlight peasants, were like, pay us higher wages. Highlight higher wages. And remember, the nobles basically ran the peasants because they're little small world if you watch my chapter 10 video, okay? The nobles were like, yeah, no, we're not paying you higher wages. You work for us, you're going to stay working because you're poor, and where else are you going to go? So peasants' revolts erupted. highlight peasants' revolts. So the Jacquerie in France, highlight Jacquerie, and the English Peasant Revolt, which was in 1381, highlight English Peasant Revolt 1381. They turned pitchforks into protest signs. But spoiler alert, most revolts got crushed and didn't really work out, but it showed that society was cracking. So meanwhile this is going on, France and England are still in their toxic relationship called the 100-Year War, which was from 1337 to 1453. Highlight the 100 Years War and the dates. So you might ask, because we briefly viewed over the 100 War last episode, what all caused it? And I gave you a little background of what caused it, but not full into depth. So what really caused it is that Edward III of England claimed himself to the French throne. So highlight Edward III of England and highlight French throne. But the French were like, now we're gonna go with Philip of Valois VI. Highlight Philip Valois VI. Wait. Highlight Philip of Valois VI. So England won many battles such as Crécy in 1346, highlight Crécy 1346, and Agincourt in 1415. And this was all thanks to the longbowmen. Highlight longbowmen. And we briefly went over longbowmen, but what a longbowman is archers who were in the military, because they didn't have guns back then, but they were archers who used a longbow. So while castles started to tremble, there came along the new inventions such as the cannon. Highlight cannon. Then came Joan of Arc in 1429. Highlight Joan of Arc 1429. And of course she was the teenage peasant girl who said that God came to her and said to fight for France. So she actually boosted everyone's hype. So just imagine how us Americans are so patriotic on July 4th. She gave France a sense of national identity. Highlight national identity, which basically means that, this is what makes us French. So this is why we think the croissant is basically associated with France, like every time we see it. But of course the English captured her and burned her, but at the age of 19. But she became a legend, and all she had to do was die.
And all he had to do was die.
Yeah, that's a lot less work.
We ought to give it a try.
So if that wasn't enough drama, the Catholic Church is at it again. So highlight the Catholic Church because there's always something going on with them. Even in Unit 1, always something going on with them. So the Catholic Church became a full reality TV show, Dance Moms, Kardashians, you name it. So I'm watching somebody get pulled over at the park right now. I was actually just wondering why a police pulled up, but now I see it. Okay, so now we're done with distractions, that's it. So in 1309, the papacy moved to Avignon, which is in France, if you didn't know that. And this is known as the Avignon papacy. So highlight Avignon and then highlight Avignon papacy. If I lost you, the papacy is like the headquarters for the Pope. So when they moved it from Rome, they didn't just move like where the Pope lives, they moved where the center of the Catholic Church was. So if you are still lost, the papacy has been in Rome because they were giving Rome the aid after their emperors and stuff, because remember that last one, Augustine, got assassinated, so they were in Rome. So now they are moving to Avignon because it is safer in Avignon compared to Rome, where it is unsafe and unstabilized because of the fall and the Germanic kingdoms. Like I said, it was safe because it was under the influence of French royalty. And people actually started to call the Pope a French puppet because, meaning from 1309 to 1377, every single Pope who ruled from Avignon was French. So this made France look like that they were only running the papacy for like French benefit because, when the Pope lives in Avignon, they're going to favor every single decision towards France and not Rome. Okay, so imagine if our last previous 14 presidents have been Canadian, but we live in America, right? And our country's not getting better. We are still in ruins, but Canada, it's great. It's going over here. Everybody has a hot tub in their backyard, but we're still in ruins, so something's got to be going on, and somebody's got to be in favor of a different country. Then the Great Shame from 1378 to 1417. Highlight the Great Shame and its dates. Yeah, well, the Great Shame hit, and the Pope who moved to Avignon, listened to the people, and in 1377 he actually moved the papacy back to Rome. But our good guy, he died in 1378, literally 1 year after he moved it back. And we got to elect a new pope. So the people of Rome were done with this. They were like, we want an Italian pope, and they pressured the cardinals to give them a Italian pope. And they wanted an Italian pope because they wanted the papacy to stay in Rome and not move to Avignon again. So the cardinals talked about it, and they picked Urban VI, and he was an Italian pope. But he turned out to be super harsh and super verbally abusive to the cardinals, so the cardinals were like, hey, this is not the guy we want running to be our pope. So they de-elected him, and they elected a different pope named Clementine VII. So highlight Urban VI and highlight Clementine VII. And Clementine VII actually set shop back up in Avignon. So even though the Romans wanted it to stay in Rome, he actually set back shop up in Avignon. So there's really no point in their pressuring the cardinals. So now there are actually two popes, which was Rome really wanted Urban VI to be the pope. So he was the pope in Rome. And then there was another pope who was named Clementine VII in Avignon. And each of them claimed to be the real pope because Urban was originally elected, but Clementine was actually the next to be elected because Urban was just not the guy to be the pope. So then, of course, in 1409, it got a lot worse. And the Council of Pisa, highlight Council of Pisa, they were kind of like your mom when you're like battling your friend for a toy in the playground, and she's like, if none of you can share and play nicely, then none of you get the toy, and she takes it. So that's basically what they did. They were like, okay, we're picking none of you to be the pope, so y'all can stop campaigning, and we're actually going to put a different pope, and we're electing a new one, because you two can't seem to step down or battle it out. The only problem is that the two other popes would not step down. So for a while, there were 3 popes. So in 1417, the Council of Constant, they finally ended the chaos by dismissing all 3 of the popes and were like, okay, none of you are going to be the pope. Go home. And they elected a new pope named Martin V. So highlight Martin V and the Council of Constant. But the damage was already done, and thinkers like John Wycliffe, highlight John Wycliffe. He was from England, by the way. And Jan Hus from Bohemia, highlight Jan Hus. They both said, the church is corrupted, we need changes, we need reforms, like ASAP. And they were crushed as heretics, but their ideas planted seeds for Reformation. Reformation, which has a lot to do in Unit 1, and this leads us to Martin Luther's 95 Thesis, which makes sense why my private story is called Luther's Notes. So while this was all going on, writers like Dante, highlight Dante, who wrote the Divine Comedy, if you haven't answered your packet yet, this one with the 40 questions, you're going to go ahead and you're going to flip to this little graph or this little table right here, and you're going to fill out who wrote what they wrote, their name, and the significance. Dante wrote the Divine Comedy. And Chaucer, who wrote Canterbury, used vernacular literature. So highlight Chaucer and vernacular literature. So ordinary people could read their work and not just the monks with Latin degrees. So artists like Giotto painted more realistic human paintings, and this led Europe more towards the Renaissance. Highlight the Renaissance. And the Renaissance is literally the title of Unit 1. Literally, when we get introduced to Unit 1, it's going to say Unit 1, the Renaissance. And basically, I don't want to give any spoilers because, honestly, nobody really cares about AP Euro. Like, if it was a book or a movie, don't tell me the spoilers, but this is like AP Euro, it's a class. The Renaissance is basically, this is where all of the people who like the musical Six, this is where King Henry and his wives come in, and this is where, when Anne Boleyn's song says that she broke England from the church because she's so sexy, this is
I broke England from the church, yeah, I'm that sexy.
Basically where he divorces Catherine of Aragon and breaks the church for Anne Boleyn. But that is all we have today for chapter 11. I hope you understand it. Just know that it is literally almost the exact same as chapter 10. Know your dates, and I'm sure we'll have a DBQ on it or some sort of writing prompt, so just go ahead and be prepared for it. So enjoy, and thanks for watching. Bye!